try something just like kind of radical.
The best part is no part.
Cool and different and something the world hasn't seen before.
Hey, this is Warren Redlick. I've got a big one for you today. We're going to talk about the $10,000 Tesla. Elon Musk talked in China about a designed in China Tesla model that they're going to make. And he talked about it being a car for the global market.
To create a China Design and Engineering Center to actually design an original car in China for worldwide consumption.
A lot of people missed where Elon was going when he talked about a car for the global market. Because I saw a lot of people talking about, oh, Tesla's going to make a $25,000 car. No. If you look at the car market in places like India and China, in India, you can buy a car for close to $4,000. So I don't think Tesla's goal is to make a $25,000 car. The goal is to shift the world to sustainable transportation.
The mission of Tesla is to accelerate the advent of sustainable transport.
So Elon Musk wants to make a $10,000 car or less that will serve China, India, Brazil, and other large markets that don't have the wealth that America has. A $25,000 car won't do the job. An important detail here is it's not about vehicle ownership. We are headed to a Robotaxi world. Elon talked at one point about custom Robotaxis.
And as I said, we're in any locations where there's not enough supply for sharing, Tesla will just make its own cars.
A Robotaxi world is a world where the car doesn't have a steering wheel.
You won't need steering wheels or pedals, and we'll just delete those. 2 years from now, we make a car that has no steering wheels or pedals.
And it's a world where people don't bother to own cars, and the important question is no longer how much did the car cost. The question is how much does it cost per mile? How much does it cost per mile? And it helps if the car costs less, because if you have a $40,000 car and you spread that over 1 million miles, that's 4 cents a mile that's going to cost, not counting interest. If you have a $10,000 car, that expense of the car spread over 1 million miles is only a penny a mile. That saves 3 cents a mile. If the car is more efficient, if the car uses less electricity per mile, if the car is designed for what the Robotaxi market is really designed for, you can make it much more efficient, and you can get from what we currently spend today in America of around 60 cents a mile on our cars, you can get down to a nickel a mile. And if you get down to a nickel a mile, that changes the game. That's an order of magnitude improvement, more than an order of magnitude. And all of a sudden, going on a 100-mile trip costs $5. Going on a 10-mile trip costs 50 cents. That's what we're trying to get to here. That's where I think Tesla is going. I think that's what Elon Musk sees, is that if you make a large volume of $10,000 or less Robotaxis, I think they can get down to $5,000 in the long run. If you can do other things to make those cars more efficient, and you can get down to a nickel a mile or less, yes, less, then the world changes. It makes life easier for poor people who can't afford to buy a $40,000 car. They can't afford to spend $2 a mile on Uber. It makes it easier for so many people to travel so much more easily. It makes the economy more efficient when people can get where they need to go. It makes the world a better place. And if you do it with Robotaxi EVs, it frees up a lot of labor to do other things. And it makes a massive improvement on the impact on the environment from all these cars driving around. Let's look at the global market, and let's look in particular at India. India is the second largest country in the world in terms of population, right behind China. You can buy the Suzuki Maruti Alto for just over $4,000 in India. It's a 4-passenger car. You can buy the Volkswagen Polo, a nicer car, for $8,500. So there are some options to buy cars in India and China for well under $10,000 with cars that people are happy with. Of course, there are people in China who spend more money. There are people in India who spend more money. But the standard that a lot of people are comfortable with, Suzuki is the leading seller of cars in India. The standard that people are comfortable with is that low-end car that we couldn't imagine driving, and they typically don't come with air conditioning. They might not come with power windows. I don't think Tesla's going to go that low in terms of what it offers, but I think the manufacturing efficiencies that Tesla gets out of making EVs that don't require the hardware, robotaxi EVs that don't require the hardware that regular cars require. You don't need a steering wheel anymore. You don't need the pedals anymore. There's a lot of things you get rid of. And as Elon famously says, the best part is no part.
The best part is no part. The best process is no process. It weighs nothing, costs nothing, can't go wrong.
So if we're able to remove parts from the cars, that means they cost less. An important detail here is how big will the robotaxi be? It is pretty common that we see 4-passenger or 5-passenger cars even at the low end. The robotaxi world, I think, is different. The vast majority of rides are a single passenger, and there's no driver in the car, so you really only need one seat for most rides. But I think it's safe to say it would make it at least a 2-seater. And maybe there's some kind of innovative design that comes up with a 3-seater. Or you could certainly do a 4-seater for under $10,000. I think in the long run, I think we're looking at a very nice Tesla robotaxi that seats 2, with room for luggage perhaps in the front. Keep in mind that the EV design, the whole structure of an EV, means there's more room in the same you have the same outer space, there's more room inside the car because there's less parts from an ICE internal combustion engine system taking up space. And I think one of the key things here is if you make the car smaller and lighter and you intend it for only one person, then it will become more efficient on a per mile basis. It won't need to accelerate or decelerate as much weight.
And you want a super efficient car so that the electricity consumption is very low.
And that will use less electricity per mile, which is one of the key goals. Keep in mind, another key detail here is we're looking at operating a cost again. We're not looking again at the total cost of the vehicle, but rather the operating cost over 1 million miles of this vehicle running. And if you're able to make the vehicle smaller and lighter, then you will wear tires less. You may be able to use less expensive tires. The various other aspects of the car. You won't need windshield wipers anymore. You're saving money on those kind of operating costs. But you may be able to get the running costs even lower, significantly lower than what we're seeing with the Tesla Model 3. The typical American car, and if you look at the IRS reimbursement rate, it's just under 60 cents a mile. So the expectation that the IRS has is that our cars cost us about 60 cents a mile. I think that's premised on the typical car costing in the ballpark of $40,000, about that car lasting 150,000 usable miles. Figure 25 miles a gallon, you figure $2.50 a gallon, you figure the costs of tires and other maintenance, etc. If you take that down to the Suzuki Alto, because it's only $4,000, and let's say they stretch it to get it to run 200,000 miles, that may be optimistic for a Suzuki Alto, but let's say they get it to run 200,000 miles. Now your cost per mile of that car is down to 2 cents a mile. Just for the taking the cost of the car over the mileage is down to 2 cents a mile from 26 cents a mile. Even if you only get 100,000 miles out of the car, it's 4 cents a mile versus 26 cents a mile. So reducing the cost of the car saves you a lot per mile if you get the same mileage out of it. The beauty of a Tesla is they're aiming for 1 million miles on each car.
The entire vehicle, battery pack inclusive, is designed to operate for 1 million miles with minimal maintenance.
So you take the Tesla Model 3 at $40,000, spread that over 1 million miles, and you're getting down to 4 cents a mile. But if you take the Tesla Robotaxi, which is what I think we're heading for here, the Tesla Robotaxi, you get a $10,000 Robotaxi, and you get that over to go 1 million miles. It's only costing you a penny a mile for that Robotaxi's cost spread over the 1 million miles. Then if you're able to increase the efficiency, instead of getting 4 miles per kilowatt hour as the Tesla gets, again, we're comparing this to 25 miles per gallon. At 25 miles per gallon, $2.50 a gallon, you're spending 10 cents a mile on gasoline. If you get to the Tesla Model 3, getting 4 miles per kilowatt hour, paying 7 cents per kilowatt hour, which is the going rate in India that I saw, Then you're talking about 1.7 cents per mile is that cost of fuel per mile on the Tesla Model 3. But if you can get down to the Tesla Robotaxi and you're paying a penny a mile for the cost of the car, you get miles per kilowatt hour up to 6 miles per kilowatt hour instead of 4 miles per kilowatt. Now you're reducing that cost per mile as well. Maybe you need to use less expensive tires because you've got less weight pressing on, or you wear the tires less because there's less weight pressing on those tires.
So we'll actually be adjusting tire design and really optimizing the car for a hyper-efficient robotaxi.
And you get the tire costs down. Maybe you're able to get other maintenance costs down, other expenses down, because there's just less car to maintain. I got it down to a nickel a mile. And if you go extreme, if you say, you know what, let's do Robotaxi Extreme, let's get it down to $5,000. We'll say it's just 2 passengers. Let's get it up to 8 miles per kilowatt hour. Let's get other expenses down just a little bit. Insurance costs should be less for a Robotaxi because they won't crash. And you maybe even get down to 4 cents a mile or less if you do everything right. And I think that's where Elon Musk is going with this. If we can get the cost per mile down that low, that is radically going to change the world. And it's achievable if you get down to a $10,000 Robotaxi, you increase the efficiency. Now keep in mind, if it weighs less, if you're only supporting 1 passenger instead of 4 passengers, because keep in mind, then what's the goal here? You've got 1 person who wants a ride. Every once in a while, you've got 2 or 3 people who want a ride, but most of the time, you're going to have 1, maybe 2 people that are looking for a ride. If you can get that cost down, if you can get the number of passengers down, you've got less weight to accelerate, to drive around, and you may need less batteries, and that's another way that you're reducing the cost of the vehicle. Right now, a Tesla Model 3 battery pack is $6,000. They're improving that all the time. They'll probably get down to $5,000. But if you go with the Tesla Robotaxi that seats 2 and it weighs less, you may be able to get to a significantly smaller battery pack, especially with the battery improvements we're expecting. And it may be $2,000 for the battery pack in that car instead of $6,000 for the battery pack. A lot of things that I think can be done to reduce the cost of that Tesla Robotaxi to really change the world.
Try something just like kind of radical. Try to do something just like cool and different and something the world hasn't seen before.
All that sounds pretty good, but remember, there are consequences. I don't think there are bad consequences, but there are real consequences. When you lower the cost of transportation so dramatically, when you lower the cost of any good or service, what you're going to see is an increased demand for that good, or increased consumption of that good or service. In the context of roadways, what that would mean is you would expect more traffic. More people would be taking rides to places because there are people who were thinking about going somewhere and decided not to go because it was too expensive. And now the price of that trip just dropped by an order of magnitude. And they don't have to watch the road anymore. They can sit in the car, the Robotaxi, just like they'd sit at home on their couch. They can interact with their friends through social media, whatever. So I think if this happens, and I think this is going to happen, whether it's in 5 years or 20 years, but I think it's more like 5 to 10 years, you're going to see a lot more vehicles on the road taking people from one place to another. And that sounds bad, but you have to recognize that, okay, well, the robotaxis will be more efficient, the robotaxis will be safer, and if it's done right, and this is where I think I'm taking another step forward in where I think this is going, if it's done right, then there are ways of reducing that traffic burden. So for example, if they're all robotaxis, then the following distances end up being shorter. They can travel in fleets, they communicate with each other, and that means that you are able to use more of the road. You need less extra space on the road. I think another really big change, which would further reduce the cost of travel, is if we decided, you know what, and I could see it going this way. Currently, cars are 5 to 6 feet wide, typically I think 6 feet wide or even more. What if cars were 3 feet wide? Cars might be 200 inches long. What if cars were 100 inches long? All of a sudden, if you shrink the size of the car, you can fit 4 times as many cars in the same roadway. especially if you don't need the following distances. Now you can fit even more on the roadway. The Boring Company tunnels create more roadways, and if you shrink down to 3 feet wide, maybe you can fit 2 vehicles in the tunnel instead of 1. So you're able to get more out of the Boring Company tunnel than you were able to get before. So I think there's a lot of ways we can be optimistic. I just want to touch on that idea of the smaller Robotaxi, where you design basically a pod for one. And the pod for one is 3 feet wide and, 6 feet long or 100 inches long or whatever. And that cost of number one, the cost of the pod is even lower. Now we're down below $5,000 for a pod, maybe less, maybe $2,000 or $3,000. So that cost per mile of the value of the pod versus is lower. The efficiency goes up. They use less electricity because, again, less weight. The maintenance costs are lower because there's simply less to maintain. I think one of the concerns that people have, which is, especially with, say, Boring Company tunnels, is that people will get claustrophobic. I think that's a concern we don't need to have. I can imagine, instead of a windshield, you have a flat screen in place of the windshield. And you can see whatever you want out of that windshield. You can see what's ahead in the tunnel. You can see, going through hyperspace in a star field. You can see a green field. If you've ever been to Universal Studios in Orlando on the Hogwarts train, for those who haven't, basically you're sitting in a train car and there's a window. It's not really a window, it's a flat panel, and you look out the window and you see all these things happening, and it's captivating, and you feel like you're on a train ride and you're watching what's happening outside the train ride, when of course what you're looking at in that window isn't really happening outside. It's just a video that's being played for you. So it's very easy to imagine that we can take something like this and make it comfortable, even though it should be claustrophobic. Using visual cues and other cues, we can make people comfortable in this environment. And we end up in this world where people are able to get where they want to go. They're not occupied. They can take a nap while they're taking the trip. They can get work done while they're taking the trip. They can play video games. Maybe the windshield is a video game, and you're playing a video game on the screen while it's taking you where you want to go. So I have a very optimistic view of the future. We live in a world with all this politics and stuff, and everybody's negative about everything. And the reality is life is wonderful, and it's only getting better. And there's moments in everybody's life where something's bad, but overall for humanity, especially here in the United States, and I think this is true in a lot of the rest of the world, life is really getting better in a lot of places. And this technological change that we're seeing is, in Elon's words, a step change. We're seeing these step changes to making our lives better and better and better. Cars are better. Neuralink's going to make things better. Boring Company, we're going into space. There's so many other technological wonders going on around us. Our smartphones are amazing, and they're getting better. So the world is a wonderful place, and I think that this is an example of how things are getting better. Is we're going to see this massive change in transportation, a transportation revolution in so many ways, where all of a sudden you're able to go 100 miles or 1,000 miles for a very small amount of money, and now you don't need to fly in a plane anymore. It's funny because I'm recording this today, and I was thinking about, for those who don't know, today is the day that Kobe Bryant passed away on a helicopter ride. And Elon Musk has taught in Los Angeles, and Elon Musk has talked about the soul-crushing traffic in Los Angeles, and it's very possible that Kobe Bryant is flying in a helicopter to avoid dealing with LA traffic. Well, what if there are Boring Company tunnels that make it easy for everyone to avoid soul-crushing traffic, and they're much safer than flying in helicopters, and all of a sudden even more lives are saved, and for me, we live in a world where everybody's negative about everything, it seems like, especially if you watch the TV news. And I'm looking at the world saying everything's fantastic. I have my problems, you have your problems, but really I look at the world ahead and I see it's spectacular. And these changes that I'm talking about, that Tesla is delivering with cars and with the future of robotaxis, this is fantastic. This is wonderful, and we should be really thrilled. So, I want to thank you for watching. Please, of course, in the comments below, please let me know what you think about the prospects of a $10,000 Tesla Robotaxi, maybe an extreme Robotaxi for $5,000, or the pods. What you think about, am I crazy? Let me know what you think. And of course, obviously, if you're not a subscriber already, please subscribe to this channel. And thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.